Across the world, the Jeep brand has quite a long heritage. In fact, if I'm going to think of a Jeep, the iconic Jeep Wrangler quickly comes to mind. However, as the current Wrangler has grown larger, more expensive, more luxurious, and full of tech features, its price tag has also ballooned to over $60,000 if you guys are going to go for a fully loaded model. So what if you want a Jeep but don't necessarily want to pay that hefty price tag? Well, the Renegade has been in the Jeep lineup since 2016, and it shares its underpinnings with the Italian-made Fiat 500X. However, for the Jeep version, the company gave it more ground clearance, gave it some significant off-road capability if you guys go for the Trailhawk model. And for 2019, Jeep made some extensive updates to the Renegade, improving the front and rear fascias, improving the interior, and adding a new turbocharged engine underneath the hood. So this week, they've loaned me a 2020 Renegade Trailhawk, and the big question I want to answer, if you guys are looking to buy a baby Jeep that won't break the bank, does the 2020 Renegade still actually feel like a Jeep? That's what we're here to find out. Now, about 5 years ago, Jeep introduced their smallest SUV, the Renegade, and I remember when this thing came out, I immediately noticed just how cute it looked on the outside. Now, of course, being one of those new small subcompact SUVs, the Renegade was one of the first, going head-to-head with things like the HR-V, the Subaru Crosstrek, which was probably the first of the smaller ones. This has been a relatively successful vehicle for Jeep. At one point, they sold nearly 110,000 of these every year, although sales have been steadily declining, and that's probably due in fact that the Renegade's age is starting to get up there, which is why Jeep just gave this thing a refresh for 2019. Now, since I haven't shown you guys the exterior styling of this car or talked about it since the 2016 model, let's go over some of the changes on this 2020 version. It's been about 5 years since I actually reviewed a Renegade for you guys, and when I first drove this thing, I actually really liked the looks of the car. It's still got that cutesy, rugged baby Jeep look to it, and I think it really works for the Renegade. So obviously for 2019, the company didn't need to make that many changes to it, but they also made some key upgrades that really bring a much more modern look to the Renegade. You can see the Trailhawk model that I'm showing you here has its own unique styling treatments with the different finish on the grille, this kind of black accent here on the hood, this really nice jet set blue metallic, which looks gorgeous with the black accents, and the big upgrade they added last year was the availability of full LED headlights and taillights. Before, you could only get a halogen headlight on this car, which really just made it look cheap and dated. These headlights, I have to say, are the classic Jeep look with the circular LED daytime running lights. You do have an incandescent turn signal, but you have LED fog lights down here. This is still a $700 option, even on the top of the line Trailhawk model, to get the LED headlights. So in true Jeep fashion, there isn't really much value here. There's a lot of options that you have to tick on, which balloon the price of this vehicle. If you guys go for the new high altitude trim, that's the only trim that comes standard with full LED headlights. But as you can see, the Renegade is a real off-road ready SUV because when you guys go for the Trailhawk model, it has 8.7 inches of ground clearance, which is about the same as what you get in a Subaru Crosstrek, but you actually get a real four-wheel drive system with a low range transfer case. No other subcompact SUV in the segment can claim that as well. So again, this is a true Jeep trail rated model. Now, as you can see here, the Trailhawk model comes with these unique set of 17-inch wheels with all-terrain tires, which also look pretty nice. I also like the finish on the wheels. They're wrapped in 215/65 series tires, so a lot of thick sidewall for when you guys take this thing off-roading. It also has the necessary skid plates that you need to help to protect the underbody of this vehicle. And from the side profile, you can really see the boxy shape of the Renegade. It's a really small car. It's around 166 inches long, which is about 10 inches shorter than most of the other compact SUVs, so about 10 to 15 inches shorter. And you can see here, the roof has this kind of black painted portion, and then my tester here has the optional Skyview dual panel sunroof, which actually has these two Freedom panels that you can remove if you guys would like. So that's kind of similar to what Jeep offers on the Wrangler, or you guys can get a traditional panoramic glass sunroof. That's a $1,500 upcharge. Now, as you can see here, the boxy theme continues at the back of the Renegade. The taillights have been slightly redone. They're now an LED design, which again is optional. Underneath here, you can see there's those orange or red tow hooks that you get on the Trailhawk models. This one here even has a towing package. The maximum towing is set at 2,000 pounds. And the exhaust, as you can see, is also hidden underneath the bumper. That's typically what you expect when you guys go for an off-road ready version of an SUV. Now, opening up the trunk, the Renegade does not offer a power liftgate, which most vehicles in the segment don't actually offer that. And as you can see here, the trunk is small, just like the Fiat 500X on which this is based. you only get about 18.5 cubic feet of space. This is about the same amount of trunk space that you get in something like a mid-size sedan. So this isn't really giving you the added versatility that you need in an SUV. You can see this massive piece here is for the roof panels. If you guys want to take those out, Jeep gives you this nice little carrying bag, which does eat up the space. When you take this out, it looks a little bit more spacious here. If you fold down those seats, the back seats, Jeep says you get around 50 cubic feet of space, which is about 10 cubic feet less than the competition. So obviously the outside of the Renegade, Jeep didn't have to do too much to it, although the big thing that they added were those full LED headlights and LED tail lights and LED daytime running lights. That was a really nice upgrade because you couldn't even get that on the Renegade pre-2019. It still kind of annoys me that this Trailhawk model doesn't come standard with it. You have to pay $700 extra for it, but that's kind of like what Jeep does. It's very similar to the Wrangler, where you have to pay extra for all these options, which eventually makes this car pretty expensive. Now, you'd be hard-pressed to realize or know that this thing is actually the same car as the Fiat 500X, which I drove a couple of weeks ago when I had that for a week. Because when you're inside the interior of the Renegade, it has a very distinctive Jeep feel. It feels like I'm piloting a vehicle that is bigger than it actually is because of the way the dashboard looks, because of how big and predominant the hood is, from the visibility in here. It is very much a boxy car, and Jeep did make some improvements for 2020 on the inside. On the inside, the baby Jeep Renegade will constantly remind you that it is the baby Jeep because the interior isn't what I would call luxurious, but the Trailhawk model does have some nice unique touches. When you shut the door sounds a little tinny. It reminds me of the noise that I heard when I drove the Fiat 500X. Starting up the car, it even has that same chime. It's an FCA chime, but it just reminds me so much of the 500X. But I will say the exterior of this car won't remind you of that. The interior also won't remind you of that Fiat as well because it has its own unique design. It's just not the most high quality in terms of the materials. Now, most vehicles in the segment are not, unless you look at the Mazda CX-30, which feels like a luxury car in comparison. But I do like some of the things that the Trailhawk model gives you. Now, first of all, these seats, these are unique to the Trailhawk model, and they're also covered in leather. This is optional, part of like a premium package. The leather itself kind of feels more like vinyl, but I do like the Trailhawk embroidered on the seat and the red stitching. The seats are also pretty wide. They're very accommodating, and they're relatively comfortable for me, so give the seats out a try for yourself. Now, looking at the rest of this interior, you can see the dashboard actually does have a soft touch injection molded plastic, but it kind of feels like a little bit cheaper end plastic. The plastic here is very smooth. It's nothing really special. Some of the vents in here have a really interesting and weird design. The door panel here is hard touch plastic, unfortunately, which is a shame because this is where I'm going to be resting my elbows. The window switches, the front windows are one touch up and down, but the window switches, I have to say, feel very cheap and flimsy. It's the same thing with the turn signal stalks, the wiper stalk. This start-stop button feels very cheap and flimsy, although the climate control knobs and whatnot, they feel a little bit nicer than that 500X that I last tested. The steering wheel here, you can see it tilts and it telescopes, which is nice. It offers a good amount of range and adjustability. You do have all your buttons over here to control the 7-inch infotainment or helper screen there in the center stack. You also have your volume control for the radio behind the steering wheel, which is a very FCA thing. Over here on the center stack, you can see this is the Uconnect 4 7-inch head unit. It looks very small because it is kind of small. Jeep offers an 8.4-inch system that includes factory navigation, which, as you can see, would get rid of this extra border over here if I had it. This looks a little bit small. The 8.4-inch screen is an extra $1,000 if you guys want that. So this is not bad. At least it includes things like Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which is definitely nice. It just, again, takes up even less real estate when you guys go for this screen because the CarPlay doesn't take up the entire screen. You can see here, this is the Uconnect 4 head unit, which is fairly easy to use. You can see all your presets and sources are up there. If you go to controls here, you can access your heated seats, your heated steering wheel, which the heated steering wheel is a nice touch. I didn't expect to find that here. And then you can go here into your settings. If you'd like, or go to your apps, you can kind of rearrange the icons here. Keep in mind that FCA has a new Uconnect 5 head unit coming out soon, which will be replacing the Uconnect 4 head unit. Now, when you put the vehicle into reverse, you can see there's the backup camera. It's nothing terribly special. It has trajectory. The camera quality is about average for the class. It just, again, looks a little bit small, so I'd recommend going for the 8.4-inch screen. Now, over here, you can see you've got your controls for your volume, a tuning knob over here. You've got dual zone climate control, which is also nice to have. And then down here, you can see this is what Jeep gives you that's unique. You have an actual real four-wheel drive system. So you have a four-wheel drive lock, You've got a 4-wheel drive low with a low range transfer case, and you can also adjust your different drive modes depending on what kind of terrain you're driving on. This is only included on the Trailhawk models. If you guys don't get this Trailhawk model, you'll just have a different type of 4-wheel drive system without the low range, which does add a lot of weight, and it also reduces the fuel economy. But if you actually want to take this off-roading, you're going to want that feature. Now over here, the rest of the center stack, there's this little area here where you can put your phone. This controls the 9-speed auto. It's a very traditional shifter. Your parking brake is an electronic one over here. You've got some interesting red trim over here on the center console with your automatic start-stop button off there, and then your stability control off button there. The center console here does slide forward and back. It's actually covered in a decent leather material, and if you open this up, you can see the lid itself feels a little bit flimsy, but it's a fairly deep storage. There's no power ports and whatnot over there. You only have one USB and a 12-volt over here, and then an aux port over there. The glove compartment, as you can see, it's actually a pretty big size. It's damped as well. It opens up fairly large. And then above me, you can see my tester has the one-touch sky panel roof, which allows you to remove the front and the rear panels when you guys use a special key that Jeep gives you right here, where you can take off the panels. Or if you want, you can replace this for the same amount of money with an actual glass panoramic roof, which is probably what I would do. I mean, it's cool to take off these panels, but I don't like how when it's open, I don't actually have any light coming in here, which is why you'd probably want to go for the glass panels. So the front seats of this car are comfortable. The interior is relatively spacious feeling, but it's not the most luxurious, and it does have some decent tech, so I think Jeep has kept it relatively fresh. So the Renegade is obviously not a luxurious option. Nothing in this segment really is, but the Trailhawk model does have some pretty cool, neat little touches to it. Now, obviously this is an SUV. However, the back seat of the Renegade has always been a little bit on the cramped side. In back of the Jeep Renegade, you can see this is a small SUV on the outside, and it's also a relatively small SUV in the back seats. The company says you get around 35 inches of legroom back here, which feels about right. This is pretty similar to the last 500X. The Mazda CX-30 has very similar space. Now, the boxy design of this thing does give it more headroom versus a lot of the competitors, and as you can see here, you can take off this panel if you'd like. This panel does not open, it doesn't slide open, but you can remove this panel, which is why you'd probably want to go for that option. No rear seat air vents back here, which I'm not surprised. This is the lowest, cheapest SUV they make. You got one USB port here, an actual 115 power outlet here, a household outlet, which is also nice and unexpected. Jeep also gives you 2 map pockets here, and then there's also the cheap hard plastic materials from the front seats. Now, the one thing I do want to point out, this car has a Kenwood stereo system, which is an extra. It's like an extra $500 if you guys want the premium audio system. It sounds okay, but it also sounds like a little aftermarket-y. I'm surprised that Jeep didn't want to go with the Harman Kardon system, what they have in some of their other models, which is an excellent sound system. So kind of keep that in mind if you guys are an audiophile. The center over here doesn't actually fold down, which would be nice if it gave me an armrest, but I kind of wasn't expecting that because most vehicles in the segment don't have the little fold down armrest. Wait a second. I thought this thing folded down. Are you sure it doesn't fold down? Oh, wait. Aha. Just kidding. It does fold down, and I get 2 cup holders here. Now, I wasn't too pleased with the last Renegade I drove with the 2.4-liter Tiger Shark engine. They did introduce a new engine last year, and this one has it. Now, underneath the tiny hood of the Renegade, Jeep actually made an upgrade last year when they replaced the top motor. Now, before they offered a 1.4-liter turbo or a 2.4-liter engine. The 1.4 is gone. That engine actually essentially came from like a Fiat 500 or Barth. The standard engine is now the 2.4-liter Tiger Shark engine that makes 180 horsepower. That powertrain wasn't really all that impressive. Now, the top engine is this 1.3-liter 4-cylinder with a turbo. It's a single overhead cam design, no variable valve timing. This is the same engine that I showed you guys in the new Fiat 500X. It's an Italian design engine. It makes 177 horsepower, so that's 3 horsepower less versus the naturally aspirated 2.4. However, this engine makes 210 pound-feet of torque. That's like a healthy 30, 40 more pound-feet of torque versus the naturally aspirated engine. So you need more torque in a vehicle like this, especially if you're going to be taking it off-roading or if you actually plan to tow with it. It only comes with a one-choice only 9-speed automatic. That's right, it's that 9-speed ZF transmission that we love oh so much. Just kidding. In this application, with fuel economy, it's rated to get 22 in the city, 27 on the highway. Those numbers are pretty bad for the subcompact segment, and the reason being is because this thing is a brick. It doesn't really have great aerodynamics, and it's also heavy. It weighs around 3,532 pounds. This is a good 300 to 400 pounds heavier than the rest of the competition, but it needs to be that way because it's got that off-road, componentry. It has the low range transfer case. It will tow more. So this is a more rugged SUV. Now with the new engine, Jeep says you're going to have improved 0 to 60 performance. So I do want to see how this new powertrain performs out on the road. So this 1.3 liter turbocharged 4-cylinder, it's a single overhead cam engine. It's the same engine that I tested in the Fiat 500X. It's still paired with that 9-speed ZF transmission, that garbage transmission that most people in the industry absolutely loathe. And in the Renegade, it still has the same kind of problems that I noticed in the Fiat 500X. Unfortunately, everything in this segment is pretty slow. So the Renegade, it doesn't mean it's fast with this engine. I mean, I do think this 1.3 is an improvement over the old 2.4 liter. It just has markedly more torque. I mean, 200 pound-feet of torque is really nice. It'll tow a maximum of 1,500 pounds or 2,000 pounds, but the transmission really just holds this thing back. It feels like several times, just like the 500X, it feels like I'm driving a car with a CVT, although this doesn't have a CVT. It has a 9-speed auto. Now, it does have smoother shifts versus the last one that I drove, which is that 500X in this car. It just, when I put my foot down, it gets super confused on which gear to pick next, and then it just kind of will select a gear, but then it'll kind of bog and then, you know, jerk its way into the next lower gear. So this ZF transmission is just, it needs to be thrown away. I think other manufacturers have realized that it sucks, and despite the tuning that everyone's trying to do, you know, a lot of brands are killing off this transmission. Other than that, the Renegade is still a very pleasant driving subcompact SUV that doesn't feel quite as small. It feels like I'm driving a bigger car. There's a lot of room in here. I especially like the, you know, the pano roof that you can get, or you can get this sky roof where you can take off the panels with a toolkit and whatnot. It is a rather unique feeling car that's just a little slow. Yeah, this thing feels like it probably will get to 60 in around maybe 9 seconds. I think that's probably what it feels like, and it's really just dulled out by the transmission, which just doesn't know which gear to be putting itself in. When you get this thing up to highway speeds, you also notice that the Renegade isn't as quiet as some of the competitors, but this one is the Trailhawk model, so it's got the actual 4-wheel drive system with a low-range transfer case. You're not going to find that with any other vehicle in this segment. It has 8.7 inches of ground clearance, which actually matches that of the Crosstrek, but I would argue that this could be more capable because it's got that low-range transfer case, which will give this thing the trail-rated capabilities. It's got the trail-rated badge. I also think that the Renegade still looks very good. I think it's still a very good-looking SUV, but I can see why the Jeep Compass is outselling this, because this one here at a sticker price of a little over 35 grand is, you know, you can get a bigger SUV with more space than this for basically the same money. I mean, you could get something like a CR-V or a RAV4 that's fully loaded. Now, keep in mind, the Renegades do have several good discounts on them, so you're not going to be paying 35 grand on this car. But, you know, with its small interior, somewhat noisy cabin, slow acceleration, even with this 1.3, this car, for me, it's a perfectly fine car, but, you know, there's other vehicles in the segment that are just more enticing. Or even if you go up a segment into a larger segment, get something like a RAV4, you know, CR-V, a Mazda CX-5, they may not have the off-road capability, but they have slightly better road manners. They're a little bit sportier to drive than this, and they have more room on the, you know, back seat and the trunk area. Fuel economy I also found to be very disappointing in this car. The trip computers told me I've averaged around 21 miles to the gallon, which is just awful. You can blame the Trailhawk's, you know, 4-wheel drive system that bogs it down. This is one of the heavier vehicles in the segment as well. It's got the aerodynamic efficiency of a brick. The seats also in this particular model, they're nicer leather material, but they're a little bit on the firmer side. They are heated seats, and you do get a heated steering wheel with 3-level heated seats, which is nice. So there are some upscale features on the Renegade. I just don't know if it's enough for me to warrant recommending this thing over a lot of its competitors. You really have to like the styling, you have to like Jeeps, you have to want and need the off-road capability of this vehicle. But other than that, on the road, where it's going to spend most of its life, you can see that it really has a few flaws in its armor. And some of you may not like its Italian roots. That could be a problem if you guys plan to keep this thing on a long-term basis. And in terms of the tech features, my tester here doesn't have adaptive cruise control. You can't even get it on the Trailhawk. It's optional. Optional still on the limited and the high altitude trim, which is already on the expensive end when you get it fully loaded. So when I first tested the Renegade about 4 years ago, I actually was rather impressed with the overall feel of this car. It feels a lot bigger and more substantial versus all the other subcompact SUVs, and that's because this thing has a real four-wheel drive system with a low-range transfer case. It actually has true off-road capability. So I would argue that yes, it does feel like a Jeep. They've done a good job taking an Italian platform and making it feel rugged and sturdy like a Jeep. The problem with the Renegade is when you look at the competition, the Renegade has quite a few faults. Its fuel economy is not great. Even though it's got a new powertrain underneath the hood, it's still rather sluggish because of that dull 9-speed automatic that's just kind of ruining everything for the drivetrain. And the interior is not the most spacious. The backseat is pretty cramped, the trunk area is pretty cramped, and that's probably one of the reasons why sales of the Renegade have been dropping over the years. At one point, Jeep was selling over 106,000 of these every year, which was one of the top selling of the subcompact segments. Last year, they only sold about 78,000, so the Subaru Crosstrek and the Honda HR-V and Jeep's own Compass outsell this thing, and I'm not surprised why the Compass does better because it's a slightly bigger vehicle for about the same money. Now let's talk a little bit about the pricing of this thing, because the Renegade is pretty cheap. It starts at around $22,000 for a base version. Now, of course, the Trailhawk model is not $22,000. In fact, you're going to spend at least close to 30 grand for a Trailhawk model. This one here, with all the options that it has, and trust me, there's a lot of options, stickers for a little over $35,000, $35,770, which is insane. You could buy something like a Toyota RAV4 Adventure or a Honda CR-V or, you know, a Subaru Forester for that amount of money. Now, keep in mind, Jeep offers a lot of incentives on this car, so you probably are going to pay under 30 grand for something that has a $35,000 sticker price. So if you guys really like the Renegade and are willing to, you know, get a good deal from your Jeep dealership, this car does have some strengths, but my money personally would probably go to just a bigger compact SUV, which is probably why, if you guys want a Jeep, the Compass is doing a little bit better versus this model. But with all that said, I hope you guys have enjoyed my full overview on the 2020 Jeep Renegade Trailhawk. If you're also looking to see the latest cars I'm testing, be sure to follow me on Instagram at Redline_reviews, like us on Facebook, and as always, guys, please keep subscribing to the Redline Reviews YouTube channel for all the latest reviews. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next video.